Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. I found her. Thanks to you guys, I found her. Who was that $30 million lady that Donald Trump was talking about?
And also, could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about 30 million,
right,
etc.?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened at USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But just there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it. So, we're looking at, we just.
So Trump has mentioned this $30 million person. He never mentions her by name. He asked Elon Musk to do that. Elon Musk didn't want to do it. I've heard Trump mention this person about 4 different times. And then I asked you guys, because I wasn't sure who it was. I was looking at Elizabeth. People were thinking maybe Hillary. We were bouncing around ideas. But then you guys let me know in the comments. It's Samantha Power. That's who it is. Her net worth was about $6 million. And then it shot up to about $30 million. And that's who Donald Trump was talking about. Here's a clip of her being sad that she got fired from being the administrator of USAID.
Well, you can imagine when you suddenly in your inbox find a termination notice or a leave of absence notice that you didn't expect to get on a flawed predicate that you're doing radical leftist insubordination. It's pretty jarring. And because there's so many lies and falsehoods circulating, and so many claims that people are sort of not with the program, I think people are just completely dislocated. There's no stable ground on which to walk. And then, of course, most of them have been laid off, so they're worried about how they're going to pay the bills and how they're going to make rent. But maybe the part that is the most striking and, for me, inspiring, if not surprising, having worked there for 4 years, is that, the people who work at USAID did not come to work at USAID for the money. The civil servants, the foreign servants, the contractors, they came to USAID because they wanted to make a difference in the world, because they saw America's interests as tied up with the interests of people, vulnerable people around the world. And so even as they're struggling to figure out how to make rent, all of a sudden, they're most struggling with the fear that so many millions of people who relied on us as a country, on USAID as an agency, but on them as individuals, that those individuals out in the world have no place to turn. And indeed, they're showing up and finding health clinics shuttered and soup kitchens closed and advisors who were helping governments renegotiate debt with China, those advisors, now taken off the books. So just the wreckage in the world is what the USAID staff that I'm in touch with are carrying with them. That's what's keeping them up at night, as much as the question of, what am I going to do tomorrow? And, how do I take care of my family? Well,
you're going to have $30 million. So you'll be fine. Take care of your family. You're good. You can shoot them alone. That's what I was saying when I was sitting with my buddy Hank that you guys met recently. And it's funny because when you hear her talking, right? I just wanted to show you that clip. I just wanted to give you a little background and show you who she is. And then we're going to get into some more stuff with her. But it's funny that they're all always playing the same game. Like, what we're really worried about is the wreckage all around the world. Soup kitchens closed. And that's what this is all about. It's all about the people. That rotten Elon Musk and Trump, they didn't do this to us. They did this to the people. It's always about the people. Sure. But people like her and many others and all the programs made it so this had to happen to USAID. This was something that had to happen. And I'll say something from just doing a little bit of research. If the only thing that comes of what Elon and Trump have done with USAID is that she's no longer a part of it, good riddance. If the whole thing went back up, working tomorrow, believe you me, just her not being there anymore is a really good thing. What other clip did I find? Oh, this is her talking about them financing journalists, reporters, and media outlets around the world.
We've actually just launched something called Reporter Shield, which is an insurance fund for journalists doing work that is politically perilous. And journalists will be able to buy in. It's basically a global public good because it's in everybody's interest, as we've discussed, for independent media to not only survive, but to thrive. So Moldova, a place drowning in willful misinformation, USA launched something called the Media M Initiative, where we worked with local media outlets to develop a membership system to increase subscription sales and to improve marketing strategies. And I met with the people who worked, at the independent media that were making use, again, of this technical support. And what we've seen is over the past 3 years, this effort, this intentionality has increased the outlet's revenue, who've been, again, aided by this program, increased revenue by 138% and online reach by an average of 160%. I'll give you another example. In Nicaragua, which is, of course, now notorious for attacks on the media, there's a really important outlet called La Prensa, which was brought to the brink of collapse. What we did is we conducted a detailed assessment of the business structure, because again, we have to think about business models. We have to think about making money, not USAID making money, but these private enterprises. And we provided an infusion of emergency cash assistance, which was important, I'm sure, in the short term, but much more importantly and enduringly, we sat down and worked with La Prensa to work through what a plan around significant restructuring to stabilize the financial situation would look like. We've actually...
That's amazing. Building businesses around the world, making sure that they see these skyrocketing percentages, cash infusions, for the short term, making sure things work out for them in the long term. Not USAID making money, though. Not us making money. We just use American tax dollars, and we just make sure that they're doing good. And what do you think about those outlets that she's talking about? You think any conservative outlets over there? You think she's financing any right-leaning people, outlets around the world? You think that's happening? And do you think possibly those same journalists are now indebted to that organization and to their political ideology? This is coming from, and I didn't realize she served under Obama, and there was a blip, and then she served under Biden. It's very interesting. Like this right here is the deep state. When they talk about the deep state, they're talking about someone like this. You don't hear about her, you don't know about her, but she's out there, she's doing her thing. But someone who did know about her was Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was talking about her just in 2024, just months ago, actually. Well, months ago, like 9 months ago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My amendment reduces the salary of Samantha Power, the administrator of the United States Agency for International Development, to $1. Samantha Power is a globalist left-wing activist who uses government positions to force the regime's views on the American people and the rest of the world. When Samantha Power took office in 2021, she set 3 priorities for the USAID in her new vision for global development. 1, broadening the coalition by increasing the number of diversity of voices at USAID. 2, focusing assistance more on the voices and needs of the most marginalized. And 3, making aid more responsive by better incorporating the perspectives of those on the ground. Under Samantha Power, USAID has focused on food security in response to the Ukraine war, climate change, democracy, and governance. Also, under Samantha Power, USAID has installed diversity, equity, and inclusion advisors in all bureaus, offices, and overseas missions, and created an agency-wide dashboard and DEI scorecards to track staff compliance with the administration's DEI directives. These blatantly political scorecards demand ideological conformity and should have no place in the government workplace or elsewhere. Furthermore, Samantha Power has repeatedly met with influential left-wing foundations while serving in the role. According to nearly 700 pages of internal calendar entries obtained by Fox News, Power met with George Soros' Open Society Foundation multiple times. Of course she did. She also met with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation at least 5 times. She also held meetings with several other powerful groups like the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations. Power's intimate association with these entities exemplifies how the Biden administration, its officials, and agencies keep close contact with left-wing outside groups who help execute extreme policy initiatives. When Samantha Power served as Obama's ambassador to the United Nations, she made hundreds of requests to intelligence agencies to unmask names associated with the 2016 Trump campaign in order to support the Russia hoax narrative. For her activism, the Biden administration granted Samantha Power a permanent seat on the National Security Council, a more prominent role than the USAID administrator she has had under previous administrations. A person who abuses her position in government to meddle in democratic elections should be nowhere near public office. Instead of fulfilling her role as an administrator, Samantha Power is focused on imposing a left-wing agenda throughout the entire U.S. government and its proxies around the world. My amendment will ensure that she is held accountable and that the American people no longer have to fund her salary. Mr. Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And that explains her perfectly. I didn't even have to go through that whole clip. I was like, okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to say something wild, but she actually just hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly who she is. And that coupled along with what I'm saying in terms of her being like a perfect example of a deep state figure, that right there tells you everything you need to know about that lady. Just wow. Met with George Soros, Open Society, Bill Gates, Ford, Rockefeller. Wow. Wow. That's just everything. She's all over the place. Man, interesting. Very, very interesting. And you think it's a very unassuming role, but she's able to kind of I didn't even mean to do that. She's able to kind of nudge things in the way she wants them to go. Now, this is her husband. His name is Cass Sunstein. Now, he is the author of a book, and he was also, I don't want to say he was playing a role, but he was also in, it says right there, he was an administrator for the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs under the Obama administration. So he was right alongside her in this type of unassuming role that where you could have more control than you would think, or at least, again, you could nudge things in certain directions. Now I'm going to have Mike Benz just explain to you what this book that he wrote is actually all about. Listen to this.
In order to avoid the outcome that results in free and unfettered alternative media popularizing ideas that could undermine the workings of the State Department or the U.S. military. Then quickly thereafter, he writes a book called Nudge. Nudge is basically the holy Bible for the censorship industry. It's basically required reading for anyone who wants to have a career in countering disinformation, or disinformation studies, if you will, or information integrity, or digital resilience, or media literacy. This is the sort of, it lays out the gospel. And it's called Nudge because it's a book about how to get people to do things without top-down coercion, the appearance of autocratic coercive control, but getting them to do it anyway. How do you, instead of shove people to do it, because that's what Russia and China do, nudge them. Find a way to get them to do it without your fingerprints being on it, without it drawing the same critiques that would have if the Russian or Chinese government decide to do this. And what it's about, it's about creating this kind of whole of society surround sound. The State Department wants to do it, DOD wants to do it, CIA wants to do it, USAID wants to do it. Okay, we don't need to make it formal government policy. We don't need to throw people in jail if they do it. We need to create, and nudge itself was primarily about the behavioral role of this, but also the behavioral psychology behind this, but also about the role of institutions in making this happen. But what you do is instead of doing top down, you astroturf a bottom up, and you create a middle out and a whole society. You want people to feel like their lives will be over if they challenge it, but you can't criminalize it. We have a First Amendment. Well, what if you raise the costs of that behavior? It's incentives, it's carrots and sticks. How do we heighten the cost of doing that? What assets do we need in civil society in order to achieve this? Well, if they're deplatformed, they can't access their wedding photos and baby photos because they're kicked off Facebook, or they see a friend of theirs was and can no longer DM with grandma because they posted about, hey, these vaccines may have come.
So, this is very
from the Wuhan.
And it's funny. It's funny because as he's saying that, I'm like, oh, hold on, let me avoid that, because I'm not really trying to get into that topic. And something reminded me of what he's saying, raising the cost. So if you listen to her speak on this whole thing again, listen.
Well, you can imagine when you suddenly in your inbox find a termination notice or a leave of absence notice that you didn't expect to get on a flawed predicate that you're doing radical leftist insubordination. It's pretty jarring. And because there's so many lies and falsehoods circulating, and so many claims that people are sort of not with the program, I think people are just completely dislocated. There's no stable ground on which to walk. And then, of course, most of them have been laid off, so they're worried about how they're going to pay the bills and how they're going to make rent. But maybe the part that is the most striking and, for me, inspiring, if not surprising, having worked there for 4 years, is that, the people who work at USAID did not come to work at USAID for the money. The civil servants, the foreign servants, the contractors, they came to USAID because they wanted to make a difference in the world, because they saw America's interests as tied up with the interests of people, vulnerable people around the world.
You're losing people who just want, if you do this, if you're going to actually go through with this, you're losing people who just want to help people. These are not regular people. These people aren't interested in money. No. And they know that the interest is tied in with the rest of the world. So not only is it affecting those employees there and herself, but it's affecting the rest of the world.
And so even as they're struggling to figure out how to make rent, all of a sudden, they're most struggling with the fear that so many millions of people who relied on us as a country, on USAID as an agency, but on them as individuals, that those individuals out in the world have no place to turn. And indeed, they're showing up and finding health clinics shuttered and soup kitchens closed and advisors who were helping governments.
You see? These places are closed. That's what people are finding now. That's what happens when you get rid of all of us. That's what Trump has done. That's what Elon has done. He's not affected us, because we're fine struggling for rent. All those people out there. Ashley has $30 million. She can help anybody with rent if she wanted to. But it's not that. It's the fact that all these clinics are closed and these soup kitchens are closed, and millions upon millions of people are affected by what you've done, because we're like angels. We're all a little piece of Jesus just walking on water and turning taxpayer dollars into wine. And and when you take us out, oh, the world suffers so much. But it's interesting. The whole thing's interesting as I look into this lady. I might go deeper. I mean, there's a whole lot more, but I think you get the gist of it. And then again, her net worth went up substantially, and I showed you guys this already. If you're avid,
You're
watcher
being
of the show.
dishonest. We haven't gotten one.
But right there, Elon Musk, he was one of the first people to comment. He was like, how did she accumulate the wealth 100 times of her after-tax salary? And that's a good question. That's what they're going to be looking into. Who knows what they're going to find when it comes to all of this? And who knows what they're going to do? I don't know. I don't know what they'll be able to prove. I really don't know. But that's who Trump was talking about. Oh, man. Again, just like I started the episode, I will say, even if this is the only thing that comes of it, getting that person away and whoever she's connected to and helps and moves around with, having that cog pulled out of that greasy, gunky machine, that's a win in and of itself. But anyways, guys, it is 5 a.m. right now. Yeah, I know. I stay up late to do these type of things. I have to get my life in order. So I have to go to bed before the sun comes out. Like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, helps the channel tremendously. And other than that, I'm out.